Hello and welcome to another episode of the Legal Cheat Podcast. Today we'll be looking at a common career conundrum we've been asked over and over again by our listeners. Should I do a law degree or should I just convert to law later? I'm joined as always by my wonderful colleague Julia Stanislow, who is going to take the law conversion route after having completed her languages degree at university. For my part, I went down the more traditional path of doing a law degree and now securing a training contract. But hopefully between us, you can see two opposite perspectives on the matter, whether or not it's worth it to do a law degree to become a lawyer. So Julia, let's start with you. What led you to choose your degree, and when did you have the realization that law might be the right career path for you?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. The short answer is, so I studied modern and medieval languages, which is quite a mouthful, but it basically meant that I studied two languages at university level. And I guess I was just good at them. That's the short answer, really. During my GCSEs, I always loved learning languages. I found it a really fun exercise. I was the SWAT that would get 100% on all vocab tests because I loved learning vocab so much, and I kept that streak into my A levels. I never dropped a point, which is really sad now that I think about it, but it genuinely brought me so much joy. I guess the longer answer is that I grew up in a very multilingual family, so languages was always something that I was surrounded by, or the speaking of multiple languages. And I liked so many different subjects at school that I thought studying a languages degree would allow me to explore all of those different subjects through the lens of like German or Spanish, which is what I ended up doing. So what lots of people don't realize is that when you study German and Spanish at university, it's not really just about studying the grammar and learning how to speak it. You learn about German philosophy or Spanish literature or history or linguistics. So it's really a kind of what you make of it degree. And I really enjoyed that. And I quite enjoyed the more analytical side of both of the languages. So I really liked philosophy. That was like my favorite thing. I did a lot of German philosophy from the 19th century and history as well. So it was quite, I guess, um, logic based. And it was just really, really fun. And I liked learning about different cultures. And I think just on a sort of principle level, I think learning loads of languages makes you a better person. So there's that. How did I then decide that I want to become a lawyer? I'd always thought about it in my sort of as a sort of background thing. In my first year, I thought, well, I'm good at writing, I'm good at reasoning, I'm good at that sort of thing. Why not become a lawyer? But I ignored it for a while, decided to think about the journalist route for the better part of my university life. And I like wrote it to newspaper. I was really seriously considering it up until I think the end of my year abroad, which was my third year, which is when I finally started thinking about law again because I realized rather than writing about the world, I rather wanted to do something in it. I wanted to like have a career which was yes, intellectually stimulating, yes, used like my writing skills and my, skills of reasoning, logic, but also which was grounded more in the relationships that you have with people. So, it's more people based. And it's more about sort of current affairs. You have to be well informed in what's going on rather than just writing about what's going on, and it sort of informs how you work. um but I realized that I had very little legal experience. I was never part of my law society at Cambridge, which is a very good law society, so I really regret that. I never really did any sort of insight days. I never tried and applied to any VAC schemes until my final year. And even when I applied in my final year, my applications were pretty poor. I think the first thing that I did that really helped me realize that it was a viable path was I took part in the Aspiring Solicitors Mentoring Scheme. Sort of at the beginning of my final year, I went to Withers for like an insight day, essentially. I got like a mentor, but I don't think I took advantage of it well enough, mostly because I didn't have the language of like the legal world and I just didn't understand what was going on. I slowly started learning a bit more about it over the course of my final year, but I really prioritized my exams, and that really took away my attention from like learning about law. And so I decided at the end, I really need to get some experience in some way, shape, or form, which is law related, just to learn more about the world of commercial law. And that's why I applied here to Legal Cheek. And this has essentially been my galvanizing experience, which has led me to, wanting to pursue a career as a commercial solicitor. I think if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't be as certain as I am now. And I understand that that's not an experience that everyone can have, but it was incredibly helpful for me because I was able to use my like experience as a university journalist in a way which helped me learn about the legal sector. But that's my very long-winded response to the you basically just why Lord me in podcast form, which is slightly traumatic having just done a bunch of interviews. But yeah, I hope that helps in some way.
I am going to give an equally long-winded response now, so do not worry. I first wanted to be a lawyer when I can't, probably about 10 years old, to be honest. I used to watch Suits a lot, and like lots of different crime shows like NCIS and CSI. And I just decided very early on that I was either going to be a lawyer or a forensic scientist because that's what I saw in the TV shows I was watching. And to me, the life of a lawyer looks very glamorous on telly, and I thought that's exactly what my life is going to be like if I become a lawyer. So I was pretty dead set on becoming a lawyer early. When I went to university for it, I found out that not actually many people go to colleges where they offer law as a subject. I thought it was a very common thing. Every college in my hometown pretty much offered law as an A-level subject, but no one else I went to uni with in my year at my college. Um, they didn't do law at A level, so I had the chance to do it early. I was quite fortunate for that. I really enjoyed it. I took part in mooting, so it's like legal debating. We had a society at my college for that. Um, but alongside that, I also did maths and French at A level. And French, as Julia said, um, I was also a little bit of a, did you say SWAT? A
Yeah.
SWAT for language? Yeah, I said neek. Like, I was a bit of a nerd for languages in at A level too. I used to love doing French. It was my favorite subject. So I was always torn between pursuing a language or pursuing law. Um, in the end, I went with law. I think I didn't realize at the time, and I will come back to this a little bit later on, that law conversions were an option when I was applying. So I just decided to do law. My second choice university was law with Chinese at UCL, which would have been very interesting because I'm not sure how Mandarin would have fit together with my thick Yorkshire accent. I don't imagine it would have sounded great. But yeah, I always wanted to pursue language on the sides. I've been trying to pick it up since and alongside it. But one of the kind of first real concrete experiences I had with law or that really sparked an interest other than television was I used to work at a local electricians and I was just doing admin stuff. I was just going through some contracts and reviewing it and I was just like analyzing these contracts. Just I didn't know what I was reading, but I just thought, oh, what if there's a loophole in here? What if there's something really interesting? Thought I was doing something really cool. And just honestly, reading through the contracts, I just found really, really interesting. I thought this whole concept of being, I don't know, legally binding, there being loopholes and contract drafting lawyers have to be really specific with all the wording. Found it really interesting, pursued it a little bit further, did that at university, came out of university, and then started applying for training contracts and now landed my training contract. That's me, kind of the standardish route into law. But what we wanted to talk about was whether nowadays there is actually any real advantage to doing a law degree over a non-law degree. And I think there's quite a lot of points to cover here. And I think it's worth stressing as well. It's completely dependent on each person. Like some people really, really, really love law. They want to do it at undergraduate level because they're purely interested in the subject, not just to go get a job in it. Whereas other people have other passions they want to pursue. So I think the first point worth pointing out is that undergraduate law gives you an understanding of the seven academic law modules you need to succeed in the SQE. So that's criminal law, contract tort, equity and trust, administrative law, and some other things. That's half of the modules that will be assessed in FLK1 and FLK2 in the SQE. So you've already got that kind of solid grounding in it, and you've learned it at a very kind of academic and high level. High level means like a summary level. What's the opposite? A detailed level? You've scrutinized it. Yeah, let's say that. You've learned it to a lot of extent. So when you come to the SQE, you should, in theory, be very well versed in it and have a little bit of a leg up in those areas. But on the other hand, you can learn those seven subjects on a law conversion course. And the law conversion course is only 1 year long, whereas your law degree is 3 years long. So you're cutting out the middleman. You don't have to do all those elective subjects you have to do at the degree level. So, for example, employment law or family law or competition law, you can choose to do all these separately, and you will have to choose electives during your law degree. If you do the law conversion, it's literally just 1 year of the most condensed subjects you need to be able to qualify as a lawyer. I think another thing worth pointing out about a law degree as well is that it teaches you the essential skills to be a lawyer. So I'd say the ability to interpret and understand and apply the law. It can be very difficult when kind of reading a statute or a case for the first time, especially some old-timey cases. It's kind of like reading Shakespeare, some of these judgments. The language used is very antiquated and it's just very hard to understand and get familiar with. Another thing as well is just the ability to write clearly and coherently. You need that to become a lawyer, and the ability to critically analyze and examine facts. But then again, another thing I'd say against not doing a law degree and doing any degree is that if you do any humanities degree, you're going to pick up that kind of general skill set of being able to write clearly and coherently just through writing essays. And you're going to have to do a lot of analysis of, I guess, language and complex information and distill that information into your own writing. So they kind of help you build. I think any university degree really teaches you the skills you need to work in the corporate world. Um, so it's not just a law degree that kind of equips you with that skill set. I think if you're genuinely interested in law at the academic level, so you're interested in policy, you're interested in the reform of the law, you're interested in the academic theory and philosophy behind case law and legislation, then it's something you should pursue. And if you're also, as I say, interested in the other elective modules, so like international law, human rights law, family law, things you don't learn on the SQE, you should definitely pursue law at undergraduate level. But otherwise, I'd perhaps consider whether you have any other passions you want to pursue and then maybe convert to law later. I would say one last thing for now before I hand over to Julie. I think you get, in a sense, a greater access to legal events, opportunities, and networks as a law student, or you're more privy to them. I don't think if you're doing a non-law degree, you are ousted from them at all. In fact, I knew lots of people at our university who didn't study law but came to the Law Society or went to the Law Ball or went to just other law networking events. I think if you know early on that you want to convert to law later and you're not a law student, you are not at any disadvantage whatsoever. You can go attend all of those events. It's just that if you are a law student, you are already kind of put inside of those networks. You are that information is more readily available to you because it is assumed you're going to go pursue a law career after that. Julie, do you think there's any other maybe advantages to doing a law degree or any reasons why you pursue another degree over a law degree?
I think if you if you're like me and you might come to the realization that you want to pursue a legal career quite late in your academic career, then sometimes it can feel like you're pushing against the tide when you're trying to learn about this very, very weird world of not just the law, but also legal recruitment. I certainly felt as though I really lacked the language of, TC applications, VAC scheme applications, and I didn't know where to start looking. And there are, of course, things that I could have done that would have been more, I could have put myself out there on my own terms and really tried to look up, attended law society events and whatnot. But I think um, even if I had done that, I felt it especially on this back scheme that whilst I didn't feel stupid or I didn't feel like I was any worse off than other people, for some of the law students, they just like they got it. Like
Mm.
everything came quite naturally to them because even if academic law is very different to the practice of law, you're steeped in a way of thinking. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, I might be completely off the mark, but I suppose you just need to, it's not necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage, but you need to be prepared to learn outside of the scope of your own degree if you're a non-law student, which can be in and of itself just quite nice. I mean, I've really enjoyed learning about the commercial legal world since finishing my degree because it's just so different. Um, but it is worth bearing that in mind. You'll need to learn. Although, as a law student, you also have to learn because I'm pretty sure that you don't have a private equity module. And that seems to be
Yeah.
everywhere right now. I think that's also worth bearing in mind. Like working as a lawyer is so unbelievably different to studying it as a degree,
Yeah.
and there are things that you will be as a law student equally unfamiliar with as a non-law student. So don't think that you're automatically going to tick all the boxes of knowledge
Yeah.
as a law student if if you study law, sorry. Um,
I do think that's an excellent point, though, in that most of the money making kind of practices of a firm, so private equity, M&A, equity capital markets, debt capital markets, anything like private capital, well, that's not covered in degree level at all, at least for
yeah.
me. And when we didn't have electives for those either, we couldn't choose to learn about equity capital markets. The closest we had was perhaps, well, contract law is mandatory on all courses. And like you don't really go into any of that sort of stuff anywhere or any kind of real world practical business scenarios. And I believe You could do company law as well, but I think company law was more to do with kind of like the formation of companies and director and shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't really to do with kind of how to raise finance for a company
Yeah.
or buying, acquiring companies, things like that. So there is quite a lot of disparities in practice from your actual degree to what if you want to go work in commercial law. If you want to go work in human rights law and you've done a human rights module at degree level or family law module and you want to work in family law, I'm sure there's quite a lot of similarities there. But for the majority of our audience that listens, I think quite a lot of them are looking for commercial law training contracts. There's a huge disparity between what you learn at degree level and what you're actually doing in practice. And just one last thing I think I'll flag, and it's not something I would advise or recommend or saying this is a great strategy. I knew, especially at our university, there were some people I spoke to who told me that they wanted to get into Cambridge or Oxford or Durham or LSE or KCL, but they said the law acceptance rates were quite like low, and they was afraid they weren't going to get in, but they wanted to go to a target uni. So some people I knew said they applied to different subjects which had an easier acceptance rate, got into that, and then they've now actually got training contracts, so it worked for them. It's not something I'd advise. I think just go for whatever your passion is, and also just I mean, there's so many unis that law firms target. There's like a big group. It like any. I mean, if you work hard enough as well, I feel like from whatever uni you come from, you can try and make your way into a law firm. I think it can be hard if you don't go to a target uni, but I think it's just stand on the merits of your application. But I do know some people who said they have done that, not advising on the merits or the smartness of that strategy there.
I mean, having done a Cambridge degree at what is, in what is an ostensibly easier degree to get into, the workload is still the same and you're still going to suffer.
Big
So
time.
please still pick something that you enjoy, because the issue with the acceptance rates for like a languages degree, for instance, is because not enough people apply to study them.
Yeah,
It's not because it's not difficult. That is a wild strategy, but each their
big
own.
time.
I think the next thing we were going to discuss was sort of the more financial aspect of picking between the two. So I'll cover this off. If you're a non-law student and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer now, I've decided. The next step is obviously the conversion. I mean, I know it's not a requirement anymore necessarily under the new SQE route. However, it's still what most people do. And firstly, you really need to bear in mind the financial cost of a conversion and of the SQE, of course. If you don't get the law conversion funded by a law firm, as is the case often in the city, it can cost you up to, 14 grand, I think I've seen. So like a good master's degree, essentially. And that's not a decision that should be taken lightly. And I think that really means that for some non-law students, especially like myself included, it was just not an option for me to self-fund the GDL. I knew very early on that I would have to get a training contract and get it funded, or I wasn't going to become a lawyer. So if you're perhaps from a background which wouldn't allow you to self-fund it, you need to be certain that you will, push through the training contract process. Without, having that maybe that black letter foundation that you might get from the GDL. I think also some people think, oh, if I do the GDL or the PGDL, sorry, I'll have an advantage over non-law students who haven't started it yet. I don't think that's true, but it can maybe give you a level of confidence that you might not have as someone coming straight out of like a history degree, whose only experience of the law and maybe some insight days and like their own research online or some illegal cheek events, for instance. And I personally found it quite disheartening when I spoke to some people at uni who I knew who were, a little more well off and who just went and did a conversion because they had nothing better to do and didn't know what to do with their lives. I I mean,
I'm glad you said that. That's very just that holds very true from
yeah,
people I know as well.
exactly. And I found it, I mean, I didn't say anything to them because I didn't want to be rude, but I found it personally so offensive that I knew that they
Mm.
didn't necessarily want to be lawyers even, or that they weren't like massively passionate about it. And I was gunning for it so hard, but I didn't have 14 grand to drop. So that is a very big thing to bear in mind. And then on top of that, if you need to get your conversion funded, if you can't just drop that amount of money on it or get a loan, the job market right now for TCs is extremely tough. I think stats are rough showing that roughly there are roughly 5,000 odd training contracts available every year. I don't know how many law grads there are exactly, but if you're adding non-law grads to that, or aspiring non-law solicitors, then you can just see that the chance of getting a TC has just decreased a lot in recent years. And it's always been competitive, but it is especially competitive right now. And so getting the TC in order to get the funding is extremely difficult. So you need to be confident that you can either take out a few years and apply, or get it on your first try, which is even for very good candidates, not always the case. And there's a financial sort of burden in that waiting period as well, because the regular job market is pretty terrible. So what if you don't have time to get, what if you don't, get like a regular job that you can just work whilst you apply? Do you have to live at home? Are you able to live at home whilst you apply? Are you able to move out? I think it's actually a very silent cost that most people don't consider, and makes, becoming a lawyer, even if you get things funded, for instance, if you're lucky, quite expensive. And that was a consideration that I had to take into account. So I think, yeah, having that financial question looming large can be something that really needs to be taken into consideration for non-law students, as well as just the general competitiveness and how this might impact your ability to get the law conversion. And just to finish off, to cover that point of you don't need to do a law conversion anymore. I think for those of you who are uninitiated, you used to have to do one before you then did the LPC as a non-law grad, and now you can just go straight into the SQE. The SQE, as Ryan has mentioned, still requires you to have like a level of knowledge with regards to black letter law. As far as I'm aware, like you, for instance, are revising your like law modules from school,
Mhm.
from university in order to prep for the SQE, right?
Yeah.
There is a reason why loads of firms still require you to do the PGDL, and I actually have always thought it to be a little bit disingenuous that they're encouraging people with no legal experience. Like, this isn't if you've worked as a paralegal or something, people with no legal experience to just go straight into the SQE. It's, and then there's a financial cost in failing the SQE and having to retake
Yeah.
it in your own terms. So it's all just, there's so many factors to consider. But yeah, Ryan.
Just
Yeah,
before we skip on to the next one, actually, I do
of course.
just want to say as well that you can get a master's loan of up to, it's near 13 grand now, I think. It's 12 point something, 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 something. But you can only take out one postgraduate loan. So you only have that access to 13 grand once. I'm not fully sure if, I think it's a bit weird with how SQE prep courses and how PGDLs are structured. I think some are master's courses technically, some aren't master's courses.
Yeah.
So sometimes funding's available, sometimes it's not. But say you did both a master's course for the PGDL and then for the SQE as well. That 13 grand's only available once. You can't take out a postgraduate loan for both of them. So if you're funding it, it's not going to cover the both of them. And as you mentioned as well with the prep course, like it's not mandatory anymore, but it's highly advisable that you take one. Same with the SQE prep courses. You don't have to take an SQE prep course. You can self-study if you want. But considering the pass rates of the SQE, I think you'd want to do as much as possible to put yourself in the position that you are passing first time, because the exams are so expensive that you don't want to resit them. And you can only have so many resits in a few years, even if you are financially capable of paying for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, Julia. What was the next thing we were going to speak about?
No, it's all right. Sorry, you've just reminded me actually. Another financial thing to consider is like your living expenses during the
Mm,
GDL, during the PGDL, sorry, and during the SQE. Lots of firms offer maintenance grants. Lots of them aren't very high. I know lots of
that is
firms
true.
offer around 10 grand. And if you're living at home, that's fine. But if you're not able to live at home, either because home is very far away, or maybe, you don't have a particularly good like dynamic with your family, for instance, or there's no space, then that makes, moving out incredibly difficult, because like most prep courses take place in large cities where rents are pretty high. I don't think there's any city in the UK that offers the conversion, let alone London, where you could live off of 8 grand, which is, I know, the maintenance grant for some big firms in London, for instance. Like, that's another thing to consider. And I mean, that's something to consider even if you're doing the SQE, but it's much easier to take out a maintenance loan, sorry, a master's grant if you can for just one year.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it's called. But yeah, that's something I had to really consider. So all of the firms I was really thinking about were ones which gave me a good maintenance grant because I knew I wouldn't be able
Same.
to afford to live otherwise. And that usually means the very big, rich, competitive ones, which are really hard to get into. So it just keeps going. And yeah, all this is telling me is how inaccessible law can be. Um, Making me rather depressed, actually. God, okay. Next, we were going to just talk about it from the perspective of law firms themselves and graduate recruitment. So, when you thought about your own considerations, financial and otherwise, that's fine. But what do the law firms think about non-law grads and law grads?
Yeah, so there's some firms nowadays that target specifically non-law students. I think we've done events with, I believe it's Bristow's before. I think they're a very IP focused firm and tech focused firm.
Yeah.
I think we've done events with them before where it's like why STEM students make great lawyers. There's other firms like that as well, like firms who are just big in venture capital, techie areas. Cooley, I don't know if they've done events like that with us, but I know they're very kind of tech forward, private equity based out of kind of Silicon Valley in California. They work with all the big tech startups. So they're looking specifically for STEM students to come over to work for them. And that's just because obviously kind of the subject matter you deal with there, IP rights, like patents and stuff like that, it's very, very technical and you need to have a very good grasp of kind of like, I don't know, engineering, physics. I'm not a STEM student, I don't know. Or kind of be very good at tech as well as be talented at interpreting and applying the law in those cases. So yeah, some firms do target non-law grads for specific reasons who do have those specialties. And it might also be that you bring some kind of different skills or industry knowledge. So well, Julia, for example, you come from a languages background. You come with very, very solid hard skills that no other degree can bring, and that is just speaking like another language or several other languages. You can work seamlessly within the international network, speak with colleagues from abroad, but also I think there's that you mentioned something earlier. I can't remember how you phrased it, but you think like learning different languages makes you a better person. I think not only is there that communication barrier with someone else who doesn't speak your language, but even if they speak English as a second language and you're speaking with them, I think there's kind of a deeper appreciation and connection you can have with colleagues and clients by speaking their language and understanding the culture, which helps a lot
Yeah.
with business development and law and things like that. And just having an appreciation for different cultural norms, etc., etc. So coming from a languages background, that's an especially useful kind of hard skill to bring with you. And I think when a law firm's looking at your application and seeing, oh, Julia Sanizler speaks 5 languages. Wow, hire her. Like that's just it's just a very cool thing to have on your CV. Um, Another thing we said this before is that a law degree doesn't translate massively into practice. So it might be somewhat kind of irrelevant if they hire someone who's done law at degree level versus someone who hasn't done law at degree level. Because nonetheless, if they go into in the case of big firms, they're going to fund your PGDL and your SQE. It's going to put you on the same like level playing field as someone who's done a law degree anyway. Um, and I read some statistics on, I think it was Chambers actually, that suggests that around 40% of trainees started their career with a non-law undergraduate degree, which 40% seems like a big number. But I've been to kind of like our offer holders event at my firm, and we have like 100 people, 100 trainees in our cohort. And I've looked around and spoken to like, obviously not all 100 yet, because I've only been to these events a couple of times. But from just speaking with people, I met people who were medics, were musicians, artists, classicists, languages people. And it seems roughly about that 40% statistic seems right, like almost half seem to come from non-law backgrounds. Um, so yeah, I just think that nowadays law is kind of open to whatever background, degree background you come from, not whatever background. As Julie says, it still can be quite inaccessible and difficult to get into. But just bringing those alternative skills there can help the firm in so many ways. And I think just as a character too, coming into that law firm, you'll just be so much more interesting if you're not kind of the same. I guess homogenized is the right way, coming from that same background that everyone else brings. It just adds a little bit of interest, something else to talk about, and just some unique skill set that might help you at some point in your career. Julia, just moving on from that.
Mm.
I know obviously you enjoyed your languages degree, and you did mention before that I agree with you on this as well. That I think lawyers, people from law undergraduates, have maybe a quicker grasp on commercial law concepts than non-law grads do, because just have that fundamental understanding. But would you have preferred to have done a law degree over your languages degree in hindsight?
Um, It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, interacting more with people who have studied law. And I think in a way I would have actually enjoyed the slightly more academic, philosophical, considerate aspect of a law degree. And that is the one thing that I do regret is not realizing that that's something I would have enjoyed. I loved philosophy at A level. It was my favorite A level, actually. I mean, I love German and Spanish, but like as an intellectual exercise, philosophy essays and sort of thinking about propositions and like analytical concepts was always my favorite way of like, yeah, it was like my favorite homework. I always did it first. And so that is something that I've always thought I might have actually enjoyed a lot more, and the sort of more policy aspect of it. But and also I think on the as well, the writing style which I learned at university was, I don't know if anyone's familiar with how Spanish language academics write. It's very flowery, even German language academics, people who write about literature, who write literary theory, criticism, it's quite expressive. And so having to readjust that style, even just for like applications, has been a little bit difficult. So I don't think I ever actually learned how to write with clarity until I started doing journalism. And even that is quite different to the highbrow kind of clarity that is expected of people who write in law. I read the kinds of things like my supervisor wrote at my VAC scheme, and I was like, oh my God, that was quite interesting and, very different to what I was used to. So I would have liked to have learned that. I think I would have been,
Also,
yeah.
sorry, just to bounce on the back of what you said there, I just think is really relevant. The emails we've received from some very high-ranking partners at law firms and how they speak in short, in the absolute like shortest slang you've ever seen that you wouldn't expect. Like it's just very, very direct and to the point. Like as short and as brief as you could imagine.
Oh, I can think of so many names. We will not name them, but yeah, it's always like, thanks, great to connect.
THX and please is PLS.
Yeah. And so, but then also seeing the kinds of things that they write in like guidance notes or whatever, or internal memos to clients, external memos to clients and things. I feel like I would just be a much clearer person if I had studied law. I think not that languages are wishy-washy, but it's just a different way of thinking about things. But ultimately, I don't think I regret it. I think it's made me, as you say, not a more interesting person, but I'm able to talk about lots of very different, unrelated things. I remember at the final partner dinner that we had for the VAC scheme, I spent a lot of it talking about languages and linguistics with one of the recruitment partners because he was asking me about Hungarian and why it's so different. And I was like, I can give you a response to that. I know about that. And, you know, it was still a very, very interesting time. I still really learnt a lot, and I learned how to be quite a jack of all trades kind of person because I did so many different subjects within languages. And I think that ability to multitask is something that's quite useful. And that's not the case for every humanities degree, I don't think. Some of them are a lot more like you do this, 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 this. Um, but for me, one week I was reading a 19th century novel, the other week I was doing like a linguistic analysis of something, and that was really fun. Um, Also, I don't know if I would have got into Cambridge for law, not going to lie. I don't think I had the passion. I think if you don't know yet at, 17, 18, then just go do something that you're interested in. I think it's so personal and so dependent. Maybe in another life I would have enjoyed the academic law degree, but I don't think I would change how I did it now, knowing what I've learned and knowing what I've experienced.
Yeah.
That's a very uncertain answer. Would you have preferred to do a non-law degree, do you
I
think?
think you know the answer to this. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
rhetorical question.
this is such
Uh,
a non-law, this is such non-law propaganda, I think, this podcast, isn't it?
it is a little bit. Yeah, I think I would have preferred to do a non-law degree and then just thinking about what I would have done, it would have been languages as well. Like French, French at A level was my favorite subject by far.
We
I
could
seem
have
to be the
taken
only,
some classes.
we could, yeah, that would have been because I didn't realize as well at Cambridge that most people learn several languages during
Yeah.
their 3 years there. So I just thought like I'd have been focused on law, maybe pick up I don't know, another Romance language. But some of the people I know learned three languages like Portuguese, German, and Spanish. And I'm like, what an interesting mix.
Mm.
And it just would have been so cool to come out of one of the things I'll say with law that it was very interesting. It was interesting. There is just such for me personally, there was just such a high workload involved. I'm not saying it's not like that for any other degree because I don't know what other people are studying. I'm sure every degree is as academically rigorous as each other, and like as much effort as you put into it is kind of going to make it. However much reading you want to do, and that's so you can do all the fair reading you want. You can make it as academically rigorous and difficult as you want. Just for me, I never had the time to appreciate what I was learning because I just felt like there was so many textbooks to read. So I was just constantly consuming it all and just trying to memorize rather than taking any time to step back and think, wow, this is actually interesting what I'm reading about.
Yeah.
Um, and I now that I'm actually kind of prepping for my SQE, which I'll be starting later this year, I'm trying to revisit some of the academic law modules. And because I'm just kind of taking my time, because obviously I'm not working to any sort of like deadlines to get practice for a supervision or get any work done to submit. I'm reading it again. I'm thinking, oh wow, this is quite interesting. I'm understanding it a bit better. But just cramming everything in just made it so uninteresting and just so just rushed, I guess. Also, because one of the things with law, and I guess this is actually the same with a lot of subjects, and you can make this argument for most subjects as well, is that every module is so isolated from each other. None of them build upon each other. So in first year, for example, I did criminal law, tort law, which is like negligence if you're not a lawyer, um, Roman law, and then we did what was the other one? Constitutional law. They're so separate from each other and don't build upon each other at all. It's not like I need any knowledge from constitutional law to understand criminal law, or I need any knowledge from criminal law to understand tort law. Same with my other subjects like family law and employment law and human rights and international law, all completely disparate subjects. So the issue is that after I'd finished a year at uni and done all those modules, I've forgotten everything. It's gone out the back of my mind. So essentially, I finished uni after 3 years, and I can only kind of remember the very, very basics of each of those subjects. And it doesn't feel like I kind of built upon it to get to come out with uni with any hard skills. Whereas I feel with languages a little bit more, it would be okay, in your first year, you might, I don't know, touch upon grammar and linguistics and vocab, but then throughout your 3 or 4 years there, including a year abroad, you do build upon those skills. So you get to come out of uni speaking fluent or almost fluent, whatever it may be. Um, Whereas for me, that knowledge just completely left as soon as I left uni. And because I graduated like 2 years ago now, I can barely remember things that I studied my third year, let alone my first year. So revisiting it all now is just a lot. It's just a lot to take in and trying to relearn it all from scratch. So that's one thing I do kind of think is a bit wishy-washy with the law degree, I guess I'd say. But if you are someone who is lucky to kind of secure a training contract whilst you're at uni, and then you have it lined up, so you finish uni in your third year, and then you take the summer off, and then you go straight into the SQE, then hopefully that information will be a lot more kind of like that knowledge will be a lot more fresh in your mind, and you'll be able to just like hit the SQE running, and it'll be a super, super easy time. But I think one of the things that led me to study law was that when I was applying for university, I wasn't really aware of the next steps to becoming a lawyer after getting my degree. I kind of just thought like, oh, I'll get my law degree and then like I'll just go out there and find a job as a lawyer. Simple as. I didn't realize there was all these kind of professional qualifications. And like in hindsight, I mean, I was 17. Perhaps I should have known better, but I was kind of just relying on my careers advisors at sixth form to tell me kind of like all these things.
Mm.
And they didn't seem to know about it. They definitely didn't know about training contracts. I've never heard of that word before until I got to university. So I just thought, okay, I'll apply for law, then I'll become a lawyer. It's as simple as that. And then at the time, if I could go back to being 17 and put myself in my shoes, I believe I thought law conversions were a thing, but you'd have to basically do another undergraduate degree and pay for it yourself. So you do your law degree and then you do another 3 years as like as a languages person or whatever you wanted to. So you do your languages degree or your history degree or economics degree, and then you do another 3 years as a lawyer, and you'd have to pay for that out of pocket. And I thought that's not an option that will ever be available to me. So I just didn't bother looking into doing any of other subjects apart from law. If I knew what I knew now, were training contracts at big firms, which is what I was targeting, and always kind of knew I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to the city. Um, would oftentimes pay for a PGDL, so I could convert from being a non-lawyer to a lawyer. I probably would have undertaken a different subject. Just that chance, I don't know, I guess pursue a passion. I'm pulling everyone over to the dark side. Don't do law, don't do law.
Don't do
Just
law.
that just that chance to kind of like pursue a passion whilst you're
Yeah,
still I guess young and you get the year. This isn't like propaganda for languages, by the way. This could be any subject you want to do. Like I was also considering doing maths at uni, which was completely like
that's
randomly, and
that's
it is, isn't it? It
I,
is just, yeah. I don't know what compelled me there. I really enjoyed maths at A level, but I just think, yeah, you come out, just you have the chance to pursue those passions while you're still young, and then you also have that kind of, as Julia says, you have that experience to talk about, not just in law degrees, but for the rest of your life. Like it's definitely like interesting in personal and professional environments. Like whatever you read, and you can. I have friends who've done history, engineering, and I always just ask them about their subjects because I'm interested. Whereas like I just feel talking to another lawyer at my law firm about my law degree is not the same level of interest. Um, but with that said as well, I guess with that said as well, it seems like I'm going to suggest a contrary point. I think a relatively common pipeline nowadays is for students from humanities subjects, especially, I'd say, to go into kind of degrees that don't necessarily associate with a degree, to go into jobs
yeah,
after their degree that don't associate with their degree. So I know all my friends who did history, none of them are historians, for example. Like going into consulting, banking, law, or accounting is just like a very common pipeline for a lot of humanities students nowadays. So I just think like it's kind of a well-trodden path. Um, and that it can be done. If you want to do a different degree, go ahead and do it, and then convert to law later. It's definitely something that's worth thinking about, I'd say. But yeah, that's enough rambling from me, I think. I don't think I have any more propaganda to spew out on this podcast for all the sixth formers listening and thinking, what should I do with my life?
yeah. Do a languages degree. Um, no. Obviously, I think the one thing to round off on is that it's a really personal choice. And
Mm,
whilst we have both, I don't know, flown the flag for the non-law route, that is by no means supposed to be a discouragement for those of you who are, applying to university next year and thinking of studying law. If you're interested in it, go ahead, but also know that it will never be a profession that's closed to you. If you don't, I still wow all of my family back home in Slovakia when I tell them I'm going to become a lawyer because for them, it's like you have to study law at university. In Germany, you have to study law. I think it's one of the great things about the English legal sector. We're world leaders in law generally, but I think also in legal recruitment. I think it's a really great option. So just consider yourself, consider what kind of interests you have, what passions you might want to pursue. And law students listening out there, don't think that non-law students are out to steal your jobs. I've seen some pretty negative opinions online on like TikTok and Instagram of law students getting quite upset that, a litany of law students are just taking the TCs. A law degree does not equal a training contract, and it would do you all quite well to know that. And I think it would make your life a lot easier if you realize that that's not, an automatic entryway into the legal profession. But yeah, know thyself, I think is the motto of this podcast. But we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you very much for listening. That's it from me. Bye.
goodbye, everyone.